Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission is to give you the essential understanding of complex topics fast. Today, we are moving beyond the heart itself and into the plumbing of the body. We're looking at the entire network of vessels and the pathways they create.
We really are. We're examining the complete closed circuit that runs through you. And it has two main parts, really. You've got the short, low-pressure pulmonary circuit, which just goes to the lungs and back.
And then the big one.
And then the big one.
Yeah.
The long, high-pressure systemic circuit that has to supply, well, everything else in your body.
And when you say long, you're not kidding. I was floored by this number. If you were to stretch out all the vessels, especially the tiny capillaries, end to end, what are we talking about?
I are talking about an estimated length of anywhere from 5,000 to maybe even 25,000 miles.
That's just staggering.
It is, and it's why this deep dive is so important. We need to unpack the how and the why. So by the end of this, you should have a really clear step-by-step map of the arterial system, the venous system, and even the big changes that happen at birth and as we age.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The building blocks, the histology of the vessels themselves. You have arteries and veins, and they're both tubes, but they're built very differently.
Fundamentally differently, and it all comes down to pressure. Both have three layers, or tunics. Starting from the inside, there's the tunica intima.
The innermost layer.
Right. It's the slick endothelial lining that blood actually touches. And in arteries, this is key, it has a boundary of elastic fibers called the internal elastic membrane.
They're moving out from there.
You hit the tunica media. This is the muscle layer. It's made of smooth muscle sheets that can contract or relax.
And that's vasoconstriction and vasodilation.
Exactly. When the sympathetic nervous system fires, the vessel constricts, and when it relaxes, it dilates. It's how your body controls blood pressure and where the blood goes.
And the final outermost layer.
That's the tunica adventitia. It's a connective tissue sheath that just sort of anchors the vessel in place. And what's interesting is, while arteries have way thicker walls overall, the adventitia is often the thickest single layer in veins.
So if you saw them side by side under a microscope, how would you tell them apart?
Well, the artery looks like a high-pressure hose. It's got thick walls and a small, round lumen that holds its shape.
Right. And the vein?
The vein is more like a deflated balloon, thinner walls, a much larger lumen, and it often just looks collapsed or flattened because the pressure inside is so low.
Okay, so let's follow the blood flow out of the heart. It starts in the biggest arteries, like the aorta. These are the elastic arteries.
And their job is all about resilience. They are basically pressure shock absorbers. They're packed with elastic fibers, so when the heart beats systole, they stretch.
They expand.
They expand. And then during diastole, when the heart rests, they recoil. That elastic recoil is what keeps blood moving forward smoothly.
Then we move down to the medium-sized ones, the muscular arteries, like the one in your wrist, the radial artery.
Yep. And these are the distribution arteries. They have much more smooth muscle than elastic fibers.
Why is that so important?
Because this is where your body fine-tunes blood flow. If you start running, your nervous system tells the muscular arteries feeding your gut to constrict and the ones feeding your legs to dilate. It's all about directing resources.
And they eventually narrow down into the tiniest arteries, the arterioles.
The gatekeepers. They are the final control point before the blood enters the main event. The capillary beds.
Right, the exchange zone. Capillaries are the only place where the magic actually happens, where oxygen, nutrients, and wastes can move between the blood and your tissues.
And that's because their walls are just a single cell thick. They're incredibly delicate, only about 8 micrometers wide. Just wide enough for a single red blood cell to squeeze through.
And there are different types, aren't there?
There are. Most common are continuous capillaries. They have a complete, unbroken lining. You find them in muscle and fat, where you want tight control over what passes through.
Okay, and then?
Then you have fenestrated capillaries. Fenestra means window. They literally have small pores or windows in their walls.
For rapid exchange.
Exactly. You find them in places like your kidneys or endocrine glands, where you need to move a lot of fluid and small molecules very quickly.
And what about the most permeable ones?
Those are the sinusoids. They're flattened, irregular, and have huge gaps between their cells. They're basically open warehouses. You see them in the liver, spleen, and bone marrow, where even large proteins and entire cells need to move in and out of the bloodstream.
So how does the body control flow into these vast networks of capillaries?
With tiny little muscular rings called precapillary sphincters. They guard the entrance to each capillary.
Like little traffic cops.
Perfect analogy. They respond to local conditions. So if your muscle tissue is working hard and producing a lot of CO2, The sphincters in that area relax and open up, flooding it with blood. When the work is done, they clamp shut again.
The system also seems to have a lot of redundancy built in, these anastomoses.
Yes, which is critical. An arterial anastomosis, or collateral, is where multiple arteries supply the same region. If one gets blocked, the others can take over. It's a vital backup system, especially in the brain and heart.
And the other time.
Arteriovenous anastomoses. These are direct shunts that connect an arteriole straight to a venule, completely bypassing the capillary bed.
Why would you want to do that?
For temperature control. In your skin, for example. If you're cold, your body shunts blood through these anastomoses to keep it deep, conserving core body heat.
All right, let's head back toward the heart on the venous side. Blood gets collected into tiny venules.
Right, and these merge into medium-sized veins, and then finally, the two large veins, the vena cava. Now remember, the pressure in here is incredibly low.
So low that it's fighting against gravity, especially in your legs.
That's the problem. And to solve it, medium-sized veins have one-way venous valves. They're just little flaps of the intima that stop blood from flowing backward.
But valves alone can't push the blood all the way to the heart.
No way. They need help. And that help comes from your muscles. Every time you move your legs, your skeletal muscles squeeze the deep veins.
Ah, the skeletal muscle pump.
That's it. It compresses the veins, forcing the blood up past the valves section by section. It's why standing still for a long time can make you feel faint. Your venous return plummets.
This brings us to a really fascinating point about blood distribution. Most of the blood isn't in the high-pressure arteries.
Not even close. At any given moment, something like 65 to 70% of your total blood volume is just sitting in the venous system. It's the body's blood reservoir.
So it's holding blood in reserve.
Precisely. About a liter of that is called the venous reserve. If you have a serious injury and start bleeding, your sympathetic nervous system triggers venoconstriction. It squeezes the veins, pushing that reserve blood into the arterial system to keep your blood pressure up.
It's an incredible safety mechanism.
Yeah.
But what happens when these vessels start to fail? I'm thinking of arteriosclerosis.
Yeah, that's the general term for the thickening and hardening of arterial walls. The most common form is atherosclerosis.
That's the one with plaque buildup.
Right. It's where lipid deposits form plaques inside the arteries. They narrow the lumen, but maybe more importantly, they make the arteries stiff and brittle. That loss of elasticity can lead to an aneurysm.
Which is a bulge in a weak spot.
A dangerous bulge in a weakened wall that can rupture, which is often catastrophic, especially in the aorta.
So how are those repaired now? I know there are new techniques.
Well, the traditional method is major open surgery to replace the damaged section. But now, the less invasive option is an endovascular stent graft. They can thread a collapsed mesh tube up through the femoral artery in your leg.
All the way up to the aorta.
All the way up. And then they expand it, basically relining the artery from the inside out to strengthen the wall. It's a remarkable procedure.
Okay, let's map out the major highways, starting with the systemic arteries. We know it all begins at the aortic valve.
It does. And right away, the aortic arch gives off three massive arteries: the brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid, and the left subclavian. These supply your head, neck, and arms.
Speaking of the head, the blood supply to the brain has its own special backup system, doesn't it? The circle of Willis.
The cerebral arterial circle, yeah. It's a masterpiece of biological engineering. It's an anastomosis, a ring of arteries at the base of the brain formed by several major vessels.
So if one of the main arteries feeding the brain gets blocked,
the circle can redirect blood from the other arteries to compensate. It ensures your brain has a constant, uninterrupted supply of oxygen, which is absolutely non-negotiable.
Okay, moving down into the abdomen. The abdominal aorta has a few key branches for the organs.
Right. There are three big unpaired arteries that supply the digestive tract: the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric, and the inferior mesenteric. Then you have paired arteries like the renals going to the kidneys.
And this all eventually splits to go down to the legs.
Yep. The path is external iliac artery becomes the femoral in your thigh, then the popliteal behind your knee, and then it splits into the tibial arteries in your lower leg.
Now, when we look at the venous map, it's different, especially in the limbs.
It is. The big difference is dual venous drainage. Your limbs have both a deep set of veins that run alongside the arteries and a completely separate superficial set of veins just under the skin.
And that's for temperature control, right?
Primarily, yes. When you're hot, your body sends blood to the superficial veins to radiate heat away. When you're cold, it keeps the blood in the deep veins to conserve warmth.
We should probably mention the median cubital vein.
Ah, yes, the one in your elbow. It's a superficial vein that connects two of the larger arm veins, and it's the go-to spot for drawing blood because it's so accessible and stable.
And blood from the lower body comes up through the inferior vena cava, or IVC. There's a really important vein in the leg to highlight here.
The great saphenous vein. It's the longest vein in your body, running all the way up the inside of your leg. And because it's superficial and quite long, it's the top choice for surgeons to harvest when they need a vessel for something like a coronary artery bypass graft.
But not all venous blood just goes straight back to the heart. There's one special detour, the hepatic portal system.
This is a really elegant system. A portal system, by definition, is a vessel that connects two different capillary beds.
Wait, so blood goes through capillaries, into a vein, and then into another set of capillaries.
Exactly. Here's how it works. The venous blood leaving your stomach and intestines is full of nutrients you just absorbed, but it might also have toxins.
You don't want that going straight into general circulation.
You definitely don't. So all that blood is collected into the hepatic portal vein, which takes it directly to the capillary beds, the sinusoids in the liver.
So the liver gets first dibs.
The liver gets to screen everything. It processes the nutrients, stores glucose, detoxifies harmful substances. And only after that is the clean blood collected by the hepatic veins and sent to the IVC. It's a brilliant metabolic checkpoint.
Let's end with the incredible changes that happen in circulation right at the beginning and end of life. Fetal circulation is completely different.
It has to be because in the womb, the lungs don't work. They're collapsed and filled with fluid, so the blood has to use shunts or bypasses.
They're the three main ones.
Right. First is the foramen ovale, a hole between the right and left atria that lets blood bypass the lungs entirely. Second is the ductus arteriosus, a small vessel connecting the pulmonary trunk directly to the aorta, again, shunting blood away from the lungs.
And the third one bypasses the liver.
That's the ductus venosus. It lets blood coming from the placenta via the umbilical vein bypass the fetal liver and go straight into the IVC.
And at birth, this all changes in an instant.
It's an amazing cascade. The baby takes its first breath, the lungs inflate, and the pressure on the left side of the heart shoots up. This pressure slams the foramen ovale shut, and it eventually seals, leaving just a small depression called the fossa ovalis.
Yeah, the other shunt.
The smooth muscles in the ductus arteriosus contract, closing it off within hours. It eventually just becomes a little ligament, the ligamentum arteriosum. The whole system reroutes itself almost immediately.
But this beautifully designed system does wear down over time. What are the key changes with aging?
Well, the heart's maximum output declines. But in the vessels, the big one is arteriosclerosis. The walls become less elastic, which raises blood pressure, and it increases the risk of an aneurysm.
And we see issues in the veins, too.
We do. The valves in the leg veins can start to fail, causing blood to pool. That's what varicose veins are. And in general, there's a higher risk of things like blood clots forming.
The complexity is just mind-boggling, from the way a single capillary works to the, life-saving design of something like the Circle of Willis. It's all so interconnected.
It really is. And when you stop and think that 65 to 70% of all your blood is in that low-pressure venous system, relying almost entirely on the skeletal muscle pump to get back to the heart, it really makes you reconsider the importance of simple movement.
That is a great final thought. So for everyone listening, how much are you moving each day to help out that massive reservoir of blood fight gravity and get back to where it needs to go? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the body's vascular network. We hope this functional breakdown serves you well.